Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to this episode of Vicinity and Beyond with me, Henry Jinman.
And me, Julie Grail.
And today we're talking about a really fascinating topic for me, electronic balloting. And so much so that I don't even have a title or a question for it, but that is the theme for today, electronic balloting. Maybe the question is, why bloody hell do we not have it yet?
Yeah.
But maybe I'm letting my position out too early here and not giving a balanced...
Everyone listening, Henry, I think anyone that's been through a bid ballot are traumatised. It's archaic. It's challenging. It's just challenging at every level. And only this week, I won't name her, but she'll know who she is when she listens. Only this week, I had a message from a bid manager running a ballot currently who said to me, "Oh my goodness, I'm so traumatized by this process. Isn't it exhausting? I'd forgotten how hard it was to run a ballot, and that she'd need some counselling afterwards." To which I responded, "Yeah, it is a real thing. Balloters Anonymous. Hello, my name is. I've just been at a bid ballot. It is that hard, and it's hard kind of for all the wrong reasons. It's not hard because we don't know how to speak to businesses and we don't know how to justify our service and we don't know how to justify what we're about. It's hard because the practicalities of getting ballot papers to businesses to allow them to have a, legitimate democratic process is really, really tricky."
So talk me through it, because I have not experienced the pain myself. I would not be welcome at one of these groups. But we do obviously have built software based on the feedback to try and make it easier for people. So if I'm going through that process, why is it so hard?
Okay, so I guess let's just go back to basics a minute. The ballot is run through legislative process, through details in the regulations. It requires a ballot holder in the local authority to either decide they're running a ballot in-house or they're outsourcing it to one of the external providers, of which there are largely two, and commercially. Do we name them? We could name them. Yeah, Civica Election Services, CES, or UK Engage.
We aren't on the BBC just yet.
No, so that's right. Yeah.
Name provider.
And actually, because those two providers have been running ballots now for a long time, they do. Between them, they probably do. I don't really know the number there. They probably do at least 2/3 of all UK bid ballots, possibly even 3/4 actually.
And when you say do, you mean the physicality of sending the postal ballot out?
They physically do it on behalf of the local authority. And in the early days, I don't think they'll mind me saying, in the early days, they took a while to create the right formula to make all that work, and they didn't necessarily fully follow or insist on following a process. We still have this happen a bit actually, but we have some local authorities from a democratic perspective go, "Oh, it's okay, we're not going to do it, we're going to give it to CS," and then stop. And we go, no, you're still legally responsible in the local authority. To oversee it and to make the decisions about each process. But what's good, because even if that has happened, the operators are really good at knowing what's right and wrong now and what the regulations require. So if we go kind of back a few steps, what the regulations say is, so a bid proposer can apply to a local authority for a download of the rateable value data to develop a bid proposal and business plan to consult on. So that's their first consultation kind of information. That's who the businesses are. That's who pays business rates. What you then need to do, obviously, from a bid point of view, is work out the difference between that and the businesses in terms of their own representatives on the ground in each place, because that's who you're talking to. That's ultimately who's going to probably vote and or probably benefit from the services and probably pay the bid levy. A little quick segue on that one, I guess, is 20 years on. At the beginning, we worked really hard with head offices, particularly of retail, food and beverage, hospitality, because the bid levy was brand new. They were paying it often at head office. So it was a head office contact was talking to us about bids, and they were the ones that were receiving a ballot paper. More often than not, it's now on the P&L of a small the business operating in the
local
local
business.
place. They're paying the bill, and therefore they're holding the vote as well.
Which sounds sensible on the face.
Which sounds really sensible. The difficulty can then be when you then go from who's on the rates list in terms of hereditament, who's going to be charged and therefore entitled to vote, transferring that into a voter list. It's done very differently in every place. So some local authorities, very few actually now, but some local authorities say, no, the rates list is the voter list. And we say, well, it's not, because the business rate payer contact that you've got there is in Timbuktu, and ballot papers can only be sent to England. So you're going to have to make a change even for that alone.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole load of other things, because then when you say, well, hold on, but we know the business we engage with day to day and deliver a service for, and for which they pay, they are going to expect to be the voter. So we have to have a process by which they have the opportunity to nominate themselves as the voter. So you have some local authorities go, oh, okay, yeah, that's a really fair point. We'll do a voter nomination process pre-notice of ballot that says, we're going to put a communication out. That's the local authority doing it instantly. Even if they've outsourced the ballot process to CS or UK Engage, they rarely run the voter nomination. It's the local authority do this bit. So they'll write out to everybody who's an eligible ratepayer, say, this is what's coming. You're going to be asked to vote in a bid ballot. This is what it looks like. Are you the voter, or is it somebody else? And on the face of it, you go, oh, that's great. Oh, that's really easy. However, response rate is tiny, really tiny, less than 10%, less than 5%.
And this is just to find
places.
out who is the nominated vote.
Yeah. And because the person that receives it is somebody who pays a business rate and knows nothing about bids.
Yeah.
Doesn't have got the first clue about bids. And in, this town, let's just call it, this town, who's going to bid ballot, and the operator in this town wants the bid, is going to pay the bid levy, wants to vote for it. They don't get asked if it's them. It's the ratepayer that gets asked. So the connection between the person that's asked and the person that wants to be asked and wants to vote doesn't happen at that point. So that's a challenge. So some have got as far as Westminster City Council, who's the local authority who've been doing this longest. They were in our first pilot programme in London in the Circle Initiative, and it was the first central London bid off the ground, was Heart of London, 21 years ago. They've advanced so far. They've got 19 bids. They bring in 25 million a year. They've done more ballots than anyone else. They've advanced to having an electronic registration process to say, you tell us through this rather than post who wants the ballot paper. So that's got better. I mean, that helps.
I'm sure we'll come on to it, but one of the challenges in persuading people here is going to be around cybersecurity and identification. But that's not, this is a solution which is digitizing a part of it, which isn't even the vote. It's just getting people to register.
Whose name?
Put your hand up. Who's going to be the voter? Okay.
Yeah. So
that's
got a reasonable response rate. It's still nowhere near 100%, but it's got a reasonable response rate. Some local authorities allow a whole kind of nomination process administered and encouraged by the bid that says, if you can audit trail for us an originating email from a voter, from a business, and secure that back to us, we'll change that on the list. Some adamantly won't do that, some will do. So there's a whole load of layers of how do you get from raw data rates list to reasonable cleansed voter list. And, why do we and should we be doing this? From a democratic point of view, we absolutely have to cleanse positively and constructively and in an auditable way that raw business rates data. Otherwise, it is not a democratic ballot. Those businesses that are going to receive that bill will be in danger of receiving that bill having never had anywhere near any consultation beyond the bid bit, consultation on the balloting bit, won't have got the voter nomination, won't have got the notice of ballot, and might not even get their ballot paper at all, even through the business, but will get the bill. And that just doesn't feel right. that's just not, arguably is really tricky. Now you could say, but yeah, if actually the person that votes is the ratepayer and they're the person that then receives the bid bill, it's only when the bid bill's received, it's not a business rates bill. So the business rates people in that business go, hold on a minute, that's a different type of bill. No, we don't do that. That's not our department. They start chasing around who does that. Either gets missed, it gets lost, it gets passed on to someone. That creates the conversation, particularly if it then goes to court summons of, hold on, we didn't know anything about this. This is not this department, it's that department. Didn't you know that? And of course, the local authority doesn't know that, do they? Because they haven't asked the right question to the right person. So this is where it gets really muddy. It seems the simplest thing, but it's really complex. And all the work that the bid does in its development process to first ballot or its consultation process to renewal, and particularly the bids that, I'm working with all these bids that are very well established now. They're on 4th, 5th term. They've been in existence for 15, 20 years. They've been delivering a service directly on the ground to these businesses in this town for 20 years. This town loves it, but still can't be the person that votes because the ballot paper never gets to them. That just can't feel right.
So if I can understand why that's a serious issue, and I can't believe I'm going to take the devil's advocate on this point now, but is the problem then in the identification? Like, let's imagine you had an electronic registration system where someone could put their hands up for each business, somehow connected up to the rates data, so that it got a lot clearer who was the valid ratepayer. But then you still sent out the ballot paper by post. How many problems have we solved?
Yeah, we've solved some, definitely. But I know from the Westminster ballots, who have already got to that stage, doesn't solve all the problems.
Okay.
So let's assume that we had a nomination process in an electronic way that got some of it right. Because just because it exists doesn't mean everyone uses it, does it? So let's assume we've got some of it right. So we've got a better chance of a ballot paper arriving in the right place. It's a piece of paper. It arrives to a business. This is particularly prevalent in the big cities. It's increasingly in a lot of places. Ballot paper arrives in the post to a postroom of a commercial office occupier whose only management of paper post these days is scan and email to the relevant person. Ballot paper becomes invalid. It's been scanned, emailed to somebody, thrown away, dead. Because the scan is not usable.
Yep.
We hit this in COVID a lot, because this is where a lot of it started, because they weren't allowed to touch anything, and businesses were saying, "No, we've had it. We had it. It got to Mr. What's in the post room. It's been killed off ever since. And can't we use this one? Can we fax it? No, you can't fax it. No, it has to be a piece of paper." So many businesses, so many systems are not geared up to move pieces of paper around anymore. So as soon as it's got issued, it's ended up to the right business, but it's dead as soon on arrival.
Okay. I'm sold on the
That one's quite hard to argue, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's regular. It's not just a one-off, it's regular.
And then the effect, going back to one of your favourite issues, so I'll introduce it, is the effect of this means that you'll have a lower turnout.
Yeah, without a turnout threshold.
Without a turnout threshold.
Yeah.
So maybe your advocacy for putting in place a turnout threshold goes hand in hand with advocacy for electronic ballots.
Yeah.
So say, okay, we're going to make it harder to achieve the amount to get in, but we're going to make it remove some friction from the process in order to run the ballot, and therefore, I wonder what effect that would have if you move that to being electronic.
Absolutely spot on, because one of the defences of bids that are not desperately comfortable with me proposing a turnout threshold is, do you know how hard it is to achieve a turnout? Well, absolutely I do, because I do this too all the time. And, even really, really good bids that I believe are absolutely in touch with their local communities and delivering great things and are hiding nothing and often can only achieve, 53% turnout, and they're really disappointed by it. But that's because of all these other things. So yes, if we can improve the access to the right to ballot, we can guarantee, we can potentially improve the turnout anyway. That allows a turnout threshold to be more valid. I still believe we should have a turnout threshold anyway. But yes, those two things should both improve democratic capacity of this voting process.
And then, presumably, all the businesses that are sitting on bid boards don't want their bid teams and their volunteers spending copious amounts of time and chasing these things up and trying to solve all the headaches of resending ballot papers that presumably occur as a result.
Torturous. I mean, it's absolutely torturous. I think a lot of bids will have a constituency, an electorate of 600 or 700. That's 600 or 700 bits of paper going here, there, and everywhere. The time it takes a bid team to chase all that out at the moment, and to go through, just getting a business to confirm whether they've even received the piece of paper or not. If they've received the piece of paper, have they done anything with it? Is it in the business somewhere? And then you chase it all out. And bear in mind, the other thing that we've talked about a lot, and I said in an earlier podcast that some still argue misguidedly that the 4-day replacement ballot paper window is too short. It's a 4 working day window. It's deliberately short because the way it's designed is you only provide a replacement in the very back end of the window of the ballot period, because if the first one's found, the original, and the replacement comes in, they cancel each other out. It's just happened the other day with one of my clients who's just said, "Oh, God, just chase this out. It's taken so long. We've got the second, we got it issued, we got it back." Their originals arrived as well. They've cancelled it. All that work.
What, so by receiving 2?
It's out. It's gone. Finished.
They
both discounted.
Right.
That the regulations quite rightly
even
say
if they
that.
both say the same.
Yeah, even if they both say the same thing. And from a transparent democratic point of view, they can't. They have to count one vote, and they won't make a judgment if they get 2 in which one was right. They have to discount them both.
Even though they both say yes.
Yeah, even if they both say yes, they're not allowed to.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I know there's a logic that they should be allowed to, but if there was a electoral expert here, they'd tell you all the reasons why they have to be completely impartial. And I get that, and we talked to a lot of electoral experts on this, and sometimes I kind of start from a different place to them, and then they justify their logic, and I go, "Oh yeah, that's fair, that's okay." Because everything about this has to be, how do we ensure we maintain an impartial ballot process but maximise democracy? So get the right to vote to as many, well, I mean, ideally all, but as many voters as is physically possible. And that's all we're always trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. So some will advocate or will argue that you're just trying to make it easier to get the yes votes in and you're trying to avoid the no voters. Absolutely not. And it's interesting
We just want more voters. We
want more voters. We want more legitimacy.
Yeah.
I've said it before, I hate seeing a result that's 98% by number and 99% by rate or value, but the turnout was right down there. It means you didn't facilitate no voters voting potentially. So there's a whole set, and I guess I should say in this, apart from the physical pieces of paper being a problem for people to handle, the postal services are not what they used to be either. Some places, postal service is very slow. It does become a barrier to trust in whether the paper is going to be received in the first place, and if it was received, whether it's going to be received back in the ballot box. So quite a lot of locations have been actively requesting a physical ballot box in a manned reception area of either a local authority building or a library or whatever, and that goes in, that's approved through the original process, that goes into the notice of ballot and the instructions to ballot, so that if they got the piece of paper, that, golden ticket, they can complete it. And rather than trusting it going back in a mailbox, they go and physically walk it to a ballot box in a manned reception somewhere. So that improves part of the process. It sort of guarantees it's back if you've got as far as identifying it.
Okay. So we're at this point now where we agree it's a terrible and arduous process. And it could be improved, we think, by electronic voting. Where what makes us think that? Where can we draw on examples to kind of go, this is a solution here?
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because you and I have both done a bit of research on this to see, it's easy to say it, but what work has been done to ensure it is workable? What's interesting is one of the kind of interesting discoveries is UK Engage have developed electronic voting for the purposes of trade unions in this country. So there is some evidence. Internationally, you found some good evidence. You talk through to me what you found.
Yeah, so just on the trade union point. So trade unions for years have faced a similar block on e-voting, particularly postal ballots for strike votes.
Yeah.
And so the Knight Review 2017 recommended piloting electronic ballots for unions, noting that it could be done securely. So government review saying it can be done securely. But they've been cautious on the implementation. But it does show they are gradually warming to the idea of it happening. So I believe trade unions don't use it for all votes, but I think they use it for certain votes within their organizations. And then internationally, our friends over in Canada, from our recent podcast there. So for their municipal elections, by 2022, more than half of Ontario's municipalities, 217 out of 417, used online or phone voting for their local elections.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? That's significant numbers.
Significant. Over 1 million Ontarians voted online in civic elections.
Yeah.
So this is fantastic use cases and suggests that it can be broadly adopted by a general population, not even you could argue that a business population is more digitally savvy than the general population.
And they had turnout gains from doing that.
Turnout gains indeed, although right now I can't see what they were.
But they did.
Yes. And that's something that I think from a democratic point of view would be advocated for by the professionals that are interested in this space.
Because I mean it'd be an interesting irony, wouldn't it, if we managed to get the commitment to do a pilot on this and the turnout went down. I mean, God, we've just sort of failed miserably, and it would have to be demonstrated that, okay, this wasn't the answer. But intuitively, as you say, from a business community, almost all the barriers for us is the archaic nature of pieces of paper and postal service, because most of the business communities we deal with and that vote for bids drive a desk or drive technology, phone or laptop, in their daily work, and are bemused by the fact that we're still asking them to go through this really outdated process, and think it's almost laughable. I mean, it's embarrassing, and that's what a lot of bid managers say to me. It's just embarrassing. It just makes us look really outmoded.
Archaic.
Because they're asking us to do something they just don't do anymore themselves.
So I found an example. So my example on turnout increase is Estonia. Who are a pioneer in internet voting. And since 2005, they've offered nationwide internet voting for elections. And it works. And so in 2023, for the first time, over half of all votes were cast online.
Wow.
So that population are
and they've
highly
been doing
digital.
it for 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That makes us look so archaic, doesn't it? We think we're a progressive country.
Yeah. And digitally savvy, and we've got technology companies and
the highest proportion of online shopping going on in the UK compared to everywhere else across Europe and America. So we're on these machines all the time.
Population.
Yeah.
So we should, in the effort of balance and thorough investigation of the issues, try and understand the reasons not to. And so Estonia gives us a clue. So voters use a secure national ID card or a mobile ID to authenticate and vote from anywhere. And they have a kind of strong digital identity infrastructure already inbuilt in their system. And I think this is the key point we need to address, because there are examples to the contrary. Whether that is Switzerland, Norway, where they've had pilots which they've halted. But from my reading, it seems to be down to kind of trust. It's
Mm.
not because something adverse has happened. It's
No.
because of the fear
Yeah.
that something adverse could happen. And it's a winning hearts and minds story, isn't it? I think. And the difficult thing is the mechanisms to protect this are technological.
Yeah.
Because you get into the kind of issues around, like, how do you maintain ballot secrecy? A really important point. But that means you are doing things in the technology which are encrypting or separating the vote from the identity.
Yeah.
And how do you maintain a secure process, but having it observable? The indications would suggest other people have done this, but I don't think it's easy. And you need a trusted authority, I think. I mean, I'm sure there'll be people who are arguing, no, you could use a blockchain for something like this, because then it's transparent to everyone.
Well, and it's interesting you say about, so you need the technology to separate the ID from the vote. And yet, the way it works at the moment with these pieces of paper that eventually get piled up and counted on someone's desk, I have over the years, historically, not so much recently, I have had a local authority officer say to me, "Oh, I can send you the file of it." And I'm like, "Send me what file?" "Oh, I can send you all the details of who voted and how they voted." No, you can't. Legally, you're not allowed to do that. So there's human error in what we've got at the moment, and those pieces of paper remain. There's a cross in a yes or a no box and a name on it, and people are viewing that information. Multiple people are viewing that information. And I've been in the early days, local authorities wanted a bid sort of proposing team to be at the count, to physically kind of verify that they're doing the right thing. And I was saying, I mean, we could, but we'd have to sit sufficiently far away from you because we can't see anything. We don't want to see anything.
No.
So what are we doing? We're watching people pick up a piece of paper and put it on a pile. What's that verifying exactly? I kind of did a few in the early days to show willing, but I was like, I don't know what you're asking me to verify because I can't see anything and I don't want to be in a position to see anything. So technology can potentially do that a lot better than people can, actually.
Yes, because you can hide that even from the system administrators.
Yeah.
So that it does maintain a secret ballot. And it's an interesting concept, isn't it? Democratic. My dad would never tell me who he voted for.
That was the generation, wasn't it?
Well, maybe, but never. And I think it was partly, it's a secret ballot.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell anyone.
Yeah.
So that's I guess a key challenge. Then the next then is, while keeping it secret, you've got to verify the identity, because you've got to make sure that the voter is only voting once for a particular physical address. And so you can have unique voter login credentials to do something like that, multi-factor authentication. You'll be familiar with getting a text message to your phone where you have to put in a code.
Oh, you get yourself in this loop, don't you, on stuff like Zero, and you loop yourself round and round if you're not careful, if you're trying to log on a different device. But the principles are there, and they're really obvious to use, aren't they?
They are to me.
Well, they are to me too, and I'm not very tech savvy. I think it's quite hard to get wrong. The interesting part about that, though, is if you go back to the Estonia example of the reason that's easy to achieve is because they're already digital ID, and that's a person. That's a personal individual for a personal vote. What we're talking about is a corporate vote, and what we've got to have is we've got to have presupposed that we've identified. It goes back to the voter identification thing at the beginning. We've got to presuppose we broadly have already identified who in the organisation is corporately responsible to cast that vote on behalf of the corporate entity, and then how are they? So in the Westminster example of already electronic registration, they'll have registered what contact information is there to receive the ballot code to be able to then vote. So that's why those two things go together necessarily. Otherwise, what are you issuing? Where are you issuing a ballot code to? Because it's still 1,000 people work in that corporate organisation, of which 20 of them are locally in this town and 80 are at a head office, and nobody's taking responsibility for receiving a ballot paper. So we've
Yeah.
still got work to do on it
Yeah.
to tie those two things together.
But I suppose in the physical world, you could say, how do you know that it was that person who ticked that box?
Oh, well, don't. And that's actually a really good point, because the regulations require a ballot holder to ensure a ballot paper is issued to the hereditament number, i.e. the entity that is responsible for that hereditament. It doesn't require, or indeed, it certainly doesn't obligate or even really require the ballot holder to define who in that corporate entity is responsible for the vote. The ballot paper itself does that. It says on the ballot paper,
Yeah.
this is the hereditament that you're going to pay a bill for.
Yeah.
You need to confirm to us by ticking this box and writing and signing that you are all duly authorised on behalf of this corporate
Okay.
entity to vote. And we've had that debate over and over, and it's come up in a couple of challenges. It's not for the ballot holder to decide who in that organisation is responsible. And this is where you get into this difficult thing of and I advocate this.
So it's not for the ballot holder to
It's
decide.
not for the ballot holder, no. So in some recent examples, actually, you get into this situation. The regulations say the ballot paper can go to local hereditament address or principal place of business. And it can do either. And we've had some debates with certain ballot holders who have said, no, we're not going to allow it to go to local hereditament address. We're going to go to principal place of business. And then we said, what do you define as principal place of business? Well, we're going to look on Companies House and we're going to find out what their registered office is. And that might be in Timbuktu. So we go, well, that's not going to work, is it?
Or it's the accountants, or it's the PO box for the building in London.
And then we get that democratic deficit again, because if you send the ballot paper to that place, you can almost guarantee it will never get in the hands of the person that needs to vote.
Yeah.
So I advocate always now that in the absence of any other auditable written instruction from a business, it goes to local hereditament address. It goes to this town, to their post box in that place, and gives them some chance getting hold of it and deciding, is it them or is it somebody else in their business, either locally or regionally or nationally?
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to them then, not the ballot holder or indeed the bid, to decide who in that business is responsible. What we morally feel the right thing to do is make sure somebody in the business gets it. And that's the
Right.
way to do it, get it
Yeah.
into the local hereditament address.
Okay.
So it could be the T-boy signs the form, but
Yeah.
if they've signed it, if they've got it and signed it, it is legitimate. It's not up to the
Okay.
ballot holder to decide whether they are the right person or not.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of flaw in the system in a way. Does anyone, dare I go as far as saying, does anyone, when they verify the voting papers back in, check if it says Mickey Mouse or Henry Jinman on behalf of Vicinity? And do they know if Mickey Mouse works for Vicinity?
Yes. And so unfortunately not, no. That's not an employee that we've yet.
I think that's fortunately, not unfortunately.
Well, that could be useful in some
Well,
context.
maybe.
So in the absence of a business's digital ID,
Yeah.
there could be some sort of process where you could send a letter with a unique secure code to each ratepayer, almost replicating that. But the important point here is it doesn't have to solve all problems. It just has to be better than
exactly
what currently is in place today. And if you can improve on it, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I suppose the next objection, quite logically, would be the Russians preventing hacking or tampering of some kind. Might not be the Russians.
I was going to say that's a bit xenophobic. It could be other people other than Russians.
That's true. There are just renowned groups of Russians who seem to enjoy a bit of nation state hacking.
Yeah.
But hackers more generally. So it needs to be a secure system. There needs to be some safeguards in place. There needs to be some sort of audit trail, penetration testing, and some sort of certification from a body to say, that is a secure system to give people trust, because that's what we need to do here. But the weakest link generally with security systems is the end user themselves. So one of the favorite hacking techniques of these kind of companies is actually social engineering,
Yeah.
and when you're actually tricking the person to give up
Yeah.
the password,
Yeah.
and that is or to put malware on their computer or something like that. And I don't think we can solve all cybersecurity problems for everyone.
No.
But there are potentially measures that can help with these kind of things. And I think those things are known. These are solvable issues, but they require just planning and user guidance in order to implement them properly. So it's as much about the process you implement as it is the technology to win that trust.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
and I guess the question on that as well, though, is if we were going to pilot electronic balloting and everyone had satisfied themselves that we'd got sufficiently secure processes, systems, and platforms to do that, is it enough to go full-scale digital, or do we have to do a hybrid model where there's still the ability to have a fallback? Are there businesses still that would say, no, I still want a piece of paper? Now, that would be a real irony, given how much pain these pieces of paper cause us. But instinctively, I feel like we probably need to build in the principle that there could be a route to apply back to the ballot holder and say, no, I actually don't want to do any of this. I still want a piece of paper. And that should probably be capable of being done.
Might be an accessibility or inclusivity argument there.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, if you've ever entered one of these Amaze house drawers.
I haven't.
Those online. I have.
But I know, have you?
Yeah.
Have you won a house
compelled?
yet?
No, absolutely
Funny
not.
that.
Nothing. I like to believe the odds are better than
Do you
winning
think anyone
the lottery,
does?
though.
Do you think that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they do.
Oh,
do
yeah.
they?
And I think it's legitimate. It's all legitimate. But
you see, I'm so untrusting that I just don't even think it's worth my time looking at it.
I think a depressing number of people don't actually take the house, though, and then just take the cash instead. But,
oh, well, that's right. Of course you would. You wouldn't take the house,
no,
would
I
you?
want the house.
Oh.
Yeah, I only enter the ones where I want the house.
It was never in the right location, is it? So.
Well, I pick the ones that are a good location for me.
I don't spend enough time looking at this. Clearly you do.
But on every entry, they always have you can enter a postal vote.
Oh, well, there you go.
For
Do
free.
they?
Yeah.
Well, actually, on some of these programmes on TV, I don't want to admit that I watch these sort of Our Yorkshire Farm or something. Other farms are available. But they have the same thing on there, don't they? I've never done the competitions, I hasten to add.
Okay.
But they have this sort of pause point where they go, oh, and you can win a holiday to this, whatever. And by the way, you could also send by post.
I think it's a legal requirement.
Is it?
And
oh,
so
there
they
you
maintained a legal requirement there to enter those kind of competitions. And again, I think it's an accessibility, inclusivity point.
They've got Highland Farm as well. It's not just Yorkshire Farm I watch. Sorry, we're digressing.
Yeah. So yes, we should probably, in the instance of implementing an electronic vote, maintain a backup option for those that want it and request it. So let's talk about whether we can actually change this. Right. So the state of quo in the law right now says, absolutely not. No electronic voting. It has to be done via post.
Yeah. Postal Services Act does incorporate the right to use couriers.
Okay.
But nothing beyond that. It's still pieces of paper rather than electronic in any way.
But when I was reading about this, the law seemed easier to change on this than I originally thought.
Okay.
Because I believe it doesn't require an act of Parliament to be passed in order to change it. Is this new information, or am I?
Well, it kind of is, in that there's been a bit of a debate about the Postal Service, because what's referenced in the regulations is the Postal Services Act. Yeah. And anything that is within the Postal Services Act can be applied to bid ballots. So are you saying that we only need to change something within the Postal Services Act to enable them to do it? Or are you saying that we need to change the regulations of bids? Because we don't have to go back to Act.
I don't have to go back to Act. I think the government has the power to change it, which is why I think campaigning and lobbying has the potential to change this and change it quite quickly. I'll follow this up with a comment on the thing to say where I found this, because I've done my classic thing and written too many notes and I can't find what I'm talking about. Let's go back to how we would go about implementing this to make sure that we're doing it correctly. So the first challenge is collecting voter contact information.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an operational step. Currently, the councils maintain their list of ratepayers, as you said, but to go digital, we need email addresses, don't we, really, or mobile numbers for each voter to be gathered.
And that's what's kind of interesting, that is often the kind of log jam for the starting point of identifying voters now. Often a bid will say to a local authority, yeah, we've got 80% of the businesses locally, we've got email addresses. Can we email them that nomination form and send it back to you? And they go, no, you can't do that. We have to do that. Okay. Will you take our email addresses? No, we can't do that. We have to go to what's on the rates list. So we get this kind of logjam of, we have the intel, but they won't necessarily accept it. So we have to get this kind of principle of, can we join forces and ensure that we're giving businesses the right to vote?
Yeah.
And many cases now, they will accept from a corporate email address relating to that hereditament number an originating email that's gone from the business to the ballot holder.
Okay.
Often the bid can't be involved in that, and I understand that. You know, there's got to be an impartiality about that. What's hard for us as bids often is, these are businesses we've been operating with and serving for 20 years and been working with the same people all that time. And each time we get to this point of, no, we still can't do that for you. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And they just don't get it. They get utterly frustrated, but we still have to send them back through these multiple hoops. And you'll have a ballot holder say, well, I don't care how difficult that is. If they want you to exist, these are the hoops they have to go through. The sort of irony is, these businesses just work with us day to day, day in, day out, see the benefits. They don't want to go through all these hoops all the time. So we just have to try and find out how we minimise these hoops. And I think we can. You know, I think the end goal of getting a digital vote, getting the electronic route to vote, we will be able to get them through the hoops to be able to do that, to minimise the paper. We are reducing the number of steps, and that's good.
Is there anything else that needs to change? For instance, would you change the requirement on the notice period for a vote? Could it be done quicker? Would you maintain it?
So notice of ballot, notification to the Secretary of State is on an 84-day rule before the ballot triggers in the legislation. I'll raise the same point I always raise on this, which is, it frustrates me that notification process to the Secretary of State is a legal necessary step to enable a ballot to be valid, and yet all it does is go into the black hole of government, and that register has never been public, still is not public. So what's the point? Whoever checks whether you did it, if there's a challenge, I guess they check that they received it. But otherwise, it's just an absolutely blunt instrument. It goes into a department of the government, and no one ever sees it. The point of that notification was an early warning sign to business that a ballot was coming. Ballot business never sees that it's coming because it's never made public. So that 84-day thing should be visible.
Yeah.
Notice of ballot, which is the ballot holder communicating with businesses to say, ballot paper's coming, look out for it, this is how it's going to look, this is what it's going to do. Are you correct? At the moment, that window is minimum 42 days before the end of the ballot period. In practice, if you jump ahead, the issue of ballot papers is minimum 28 days before ballot day. So it's usually a 2-week window. And in practice, that 2-week window is a bit meaningless, because the lead in time to print and prepare and get ready to post the ballot papers takes half of that 14-day window anyway.
Okay.
So by the time it's been sent, somebody's gone, oh, actually, that's not us now, it's someone else. You've lost half the time, and the ballot paper's been printed anyway and is ready to post out. So that 14-day period is kind of meaningless.
Okay.
I'm not saying don't have it, because when you get to electronic, it's actually really useful, and 14 days would be enough. But in the postal process, it's kind of irrelevant.
And I'm imagining a system whereby we built one for a previous business where there was a voting mechanism where we had, and it was using a digital currency, and it was for students in a classroom. And then they would sometimes do this exercise in class, and they would see the voting happening. And then the a winner be announced.
Yeah.
But you could have a similar thing here. You come into work each day as the bid, and you can see how many votes have come in, and you can have monitoring
wouldn't that be
real
amazing?
time of the.
Well, in a way, we kind of do, using your ballot dashboard. If we have Vicinity, the ballot dashboard, based on the monitoring information that gets provided back, albeit through the secret ballot process. So here's the irony, some bids have a monitoring kind of exit poll principle provided to them through the ballot holder of X number of ballot papers have been received back this week. They're from these hereditaments. You never know, obviously, how they voted, but they're back in to save chasing them out again. Some local authorities adamantly won't provide that exit poll information. In practice, the reason you get it, the reason you kind of need it, is from a campaign point of view as a bid, you want to satisfy yourself every business has received the ballot paper and is going to do something with it and is going to send it back. And then you want to be able, if you're doing with 700, you want to be able to knock a few off to not keep bothering people. And I guess an anti-lobby might say, it's kind of none of your business. Well, it is, to be sure that they're coming in, because the postal service is so unreliable now. Their internal processes and businesses are so unreliable. And, dare I say it, human spirit can be quite unreliable, because they'll say they voted, but in fact it never comes. And we can never really prove whether it never came because they never did it, or it never came because the system failed them. And that can then be really frustrating, because when we say sometimes to a business, and they adamantly say, no, we've voted, and we say, you haven't, it hasn't come in. Sometimes it didn't get out of their own building, but they genuinely thought they had voted. So actually it is really in our interest to see that. And so what we do with that information at our end is we then log it as predicted votes in your dashboard, and we see that thing going up and up, and we get a sense of, is the turnout valid enough? And if it isn't, and that's where you then, when you go to the replacement process at the end, you're actively trying to ensure businesses get the right to cast a vote. If you're on a lower turnout, you're feeling really uncomfortable, saying, well, we might be winning, but not winning well enough, because we need there to be a good enough mandate. And if you're blank about it, if you just issue it and go, okay, we'll wait to see what happens at the end, you'll get a terrible turnout, and you'll feel really compromised, even if you've won. Because it's not about winning that information, it's about doing it well. It's about doing turnout well.
So I think we've spoken about the problems which probably a lot of our listeners understand and know already, and
are traumatized
by. We've spoken about some of the issues about an electronic system and how they could be mitigated. What stage are we at in terms of advocating for this? Because I've heard I thought about this for a while, that this should be something that exists, but relatively recently it seems to have been capturing some attention.
It is great, gaining a bit of traction. I mean, I've been saying it for 15 years.
Okay, you've been saying it for longer.
But lots of people have been saying it for a long time. I mean, frankly, anyone that's been through a few ballots say, gosh, surely there's a better way of doing this. But particularly, I think it's gathered steam post-COVID, because the COVID period presented much higher level of problems than we'd had before, because people just weren't in the office. Because those businesses that didn't previously have, but then created paper-free environments because of the virus infection concerns, gave us this massive logjam, had loads of people working at home. Even post-COVID, we've got this hybrid working model that means if you deliver that piece of paper to that office, they're not necessarily going to get it in the time frame that they're going to go back into the office, because hybrid working is, 2 days a week in the office, and the replacement week just doesn't work if they're not in the office. So there is a heightened necessity, but also there's a heightened interest, having gone through that period of pain. So we've got more lobbying. I mean, Westminster City Council are actively discussing this now and looking to directly request kind of progress again from government on it.
So I would have thought COVID would have been, because some examples I believe abroad, you did start seeing more electronic voting. I think when we spoke to Rachel from OBIA in Canada, and she said that for their AGMs, they started bringing in digital AGMs because of COVID, and they have to vote at those AGMs because that's where the sort of democratic takes place there, and they saw turnout increases.
Yeah.
But here we didn't consider it. It just got
we got ballots deferred because it was in the too difficult box to do during the COVID period.
Right.
We got some ballots that couldn't get deferred because they were already in process and carried on, but then had a load of switching from a business address to a home address. So a load of people receive ballot papers at home, which is actually quite an imposition. And I mean, that happened. It happened a lot. And voters were willing to provide home addresses. I felt quite compromised having business contacts providing me with a home address, us seeing it via a completion of a form process. That felt a bit wrong. And as I say, a lot of those people are still working from home. This digital process, you don't need to know any of those personal details. You just need to issue a code, and it doesn't matter who they are, where they are. They just need to be issued something that is anonymous to all of us. So there's a heightened interest, there's a heightened need, and I think people more generally are increasingly in everyday life using digital methods for everything they do. You know, who doesn't do online banking? Who doesn't have online software systems for all sorts of things in their life? Who doesn't operate on apps for almost everything they do? You know, like even your granny doesn't she? I haven't got any grannies left, but because I'm of that age. But you know, everywhere. I suppose my dad's in that category now. But you know, like every generation does online stuff now. It's not unique to one generation. So it just feels so much more normalised.
So one final thought to leave you with, now that I found it. So the reason why I think that it's the provision for change is encouraging is that in the 2003 Act for England and Wales, it explicitly provides that the Secretary of State may by regulations make provision in relation to ballots, meaning the government has the power to enable electronic or other voting methods via a regulatory change without needing a whole new Act of Parliament.
Correct.
Similarly, devolved administrations could update their bid regulations.
Yeah, so the regulations require the change, but the regulations are... We still have had no regulatory change to the bid regulations since they started in 2004. So it might seem easy, but getting regulatory change is still quite
hard.
Load of hurdles. Not impossible by any stretch, but still quite difficult. So we've been arguing a number of things for many years to have some change on, to have some development on. We haven't achieved any of that yet. I mean, arguably, a lot in the early days, and I kind of understood this, the government were really reticent to consider any regulatory change because the principle was you just get workarounds. And of course we have, you know, we've just got workarounds on things. As I said earlier, some are still arguing that 4-day window is too short at the end. It's not. It's absolutely not. It's because they don't understand what it's for. But piggybacking on some parliamentary time to get some regulatory change in here is not insurmountable. Absolutely not insurmountable if the will is there. Part of our challenge in all of this is in the agenda of government where they're dealing with enormous social issues. Are business bid ballots that important to them? Kind of sadly they're not. But then you could flip it the other way. Yeah, but it's a tiny change could make a massive difference. And democracy is really important to government. Democracy is really important to us. And a tiny change could make a big, big difference. And are we seeing failure of bids because of this style of balloting? No, but we are seeing lower turnouts. And is that a good thing? No, it's absolutely not. So there is a kind of pressure. When you've got mainstream bids that have been in place for 3 or 4 terms, they've existed for 20 years and their turnouts are going down. That's not because they're bad bids. It's not because they're doing something wrong. It's because the system is failing them. And that's what, a lot of my colleagues in these bids, and myself included, we've done masses and masses of ballots over the years, and it's getting harder and harder. It's not getting easier, and it shouldn't be.
In which case, keep going. Keep advocating.
Balloters Anonymous.
Yes. And we'll be setting up the first group of Balloters Anonymous soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.